Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. This is episode number 165 of the show, and I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. And this week I have 7 new LitRPG titles just for you folks at home. And that includes us beginning with Viridian Gate Online, Dead Man's Tale, a LitRPG adventure, The Illusionist, book number 2. After that will be Darkhand, Alpha World, book number 7. Then it is going to be Dark World, Transformation, book number 2. After that, it'll be Shyft, book number 1, Defender and of Gallowind, a LitRPG adventure. Then it'll be Save Point Reload, book number 2 in that series. Then it'll be Into the Game, Dungeon Crawl Quest, a LitRPG adventure, Wizard Warrior Quest. And last but not least, it'll be the controversial The Land of Trademark Online. So all kinds of fun stories for you folks this week. But before we get into those reviews, we're going to go into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with the news about Perimeter Defense by Michael Antonoff. It is now on the Kindle Unlimited program. It hadn't been previously. A lot of translated novels from Russia don't initially start in the KU program just because the publishers have to recoup translation costs, and that cost a bit. But that particular series is now on Kindle Unlimited, so go check it out. Also from LitRPG author, we have the giveaway of books. Edwin, the author of Warlock Rain of Blood, Edwin McCrae, wrote into the podcast letting us know basically that he's doing a giveaway of 100 free copies of his book. About 50 are left available as of today. We'll have a link in the show notes if you want to pick that up for free. It's being done through BookFunnel, so be aware of that. In other LitRPG news, we also have S.R. Rowland, the author of PNG Online and Sentenced to Troll. He was interviewed by JVJ Podcast recently, so if you want to go check out that interview, we'll have a link in the show notes for you. But it's always great to see other places talking to LitRPG authors. That's always fun. In more LitRPG news, we have Jeffrey fucking Logue, author of the Slime Dungeon Chronicles. He's released an update on the side-scroller game that he's making based on his intellectual property. That title. It has a variety of monsters, new locations, slime powers, and some pretty great music. We're going to play you a little bit of that just so you have a chance to see it. There. So there we go, folks. I personally think it's a very fun game. I've only got to play a few demos myself, but it's super tremendous to see the amount of progress that the author has made on just kind of this project that he's doing, and just like the variety of monsters, their attack patterns, the changes in the actual slime sprite behavior and the different powers he gets. It's all very, very fun stuff. Okay, also from Jeffrey Falcon Logue, he released a new cover art or like an early cover, I should say, for the second book in his new Dungeon War series. I think it looks pretty cute, actually, like really interesting. Obviously, it's again a rough kind of draft, but I like book 1 in that new series that he's doing, and I'm hoping to read book number 2 and see if I enjoy it as well. Oh, on to some very interesting news from a legal perspective, I think. I'll say. Anyways, if you've never heard of ebook.bike, it is a website that lets users post pirated ebooks for anyone to download. Not only do they just like list files, though, they go out of the way to like actively promote popular pirated titles for people to download. The piracy site has a ton of authors on there, including many of your favorite LitRPG authors. Travis Robert Mejia is the site founder, one of the site founders, I should say, and manager. He has also regularly been accused of ignoring takedown notices and DMCA notices sent by authors who were just asking them to not put their works up illegally without their permission for people to download and for free, because they feel like they're losing revenue from actual ebook sales that pay their bills. And the Robert McKay's response to the accusations, he said this in an interview with Star.com. If people don't think that I'm upholding my duties as a web developer or website owner to prevent copyrighted materials from entering my website, take me to court, he said. I'm confident that I'm upholding the letter of the law. and someone took moment. John Van Stry, who's shown in this picture here, author of the Portal of Infinity series, Valen's Legacy, and Days of Future Past series, and some other stuff. He's actually had enough of it, and he is suing the founders and the managers of that site. He's already apparently invested over $19,000 of his own money in the legal battle with the piracy site ebooks.bike. Now, John Van Stry has started a GoFundMe campaign to help cover future legal costs associated with this battle, and readers and authors have responded in droves. He's already raised. He was originally asking for $30,000 on the GoFundMe campaign. He's in just a few days since the campaign has started. He's already raised over $20,000, and that really just reflects like the sheer frustration that authors have had with this site and battling it over the last years and months. And again, not just LitRPG authors. There are definitely a ton of us there. But romance authors, science fiction, fantasy, all a bunch of stuff there. And the author apparently is the manager of the site is making money from these things through advertisers, through links, whatever the case is. And so it seems legitimate that authors would be annoyed with this and not want it to continue on. But most of this news article is just about, if you want to support John Van Stry in his efforts to do something about this piracy site, go donate to his campaign. A lot of people have. So, on a related note, though, Travis Robert McKay, the guy who started that website and managed it, he also tried to do a GoFundMe campaign. I thought it was really funny. The difference is that John Van Stry has gotten lots of support. Travis Robert McKay had his campaign shut down because apparently it violated some terms of service, or there were a lot of user complaints about it essentially trying to fund a piracy website, or at least the legal battle to keep it going. There are some nuances to the story, which I don't have time to get into, obviously, but you can read about how many the many issues that authors have had with McRae and his response. We'll have links, show notes for you to read that article from the Star, and including also links to the GoFundMe campaign for John Van Stry, and also the actual legal complaint from John Van Stry against Travis Robert McKay and his company, and the legal entity that's being used to fund the site and run it. A lot of interesting nuances to the story. Again, there are a bunch of things, but definitely go read the articles. It was interesting to kind of dive into, but here we go. Okay, last bit of LitRPG news. Wanted to end on a happier note. Charles Dean has issued a challenge. He's thrown down the gauntlet. And if you don't know who Charles Dean is, shame on you. He's the author of War Eternus. Another popular series is going to be The Bathrobe Knight. He's also the Merchant of Tikva author and some other novels, but those are some of his LitRPG stories. And he started a fan group of not just his readers, but also lovers of LitRPG and Gamelit, and just a place where people can kind of feel free to talk about the stories they love and why they like them, feeling free to spoil content. And it's called the Spoiled Rotten Readers Group. RPG and Gamelit books, or game books, Spoiled Rotten Readers is the title, basically. And Charles Dean has kind of issued a challenge out there. He said if we get 300 followers by the end of April, he will do some very special performances, and there will be live broadcasts for everybody to enjoy. And in his own words, this is how he describes the challenge. If we reach, hold on, I gotta pretend to have a nice thick beard. If we reach 300 members for Spoiled Rotten Readers by the end of April, I shall pull a Chris Johns and narrate/sing a little. I'll try to rope Jeff Hayes and Annie into the narration so we can do a mini play with one of the books. Don't worry about them finding out. They ignore story tags. Or they know tags. Okay. The group is currently at 251 of the needed 300 followers to meet this challenge. So if you were like me, and you want to see the author of War Eternus and The Bathrobe Knight do some fun skits, sing some songs, please just go join the group. Go follow it. Full disclosure, Charles is a friend of mine, and I'm really just doing this because I want to see him do some silly things on the air. So just that's why I'm doing this, and I'm really encouraging you to join in the fun. Just go follow the group, and once we hit 300, he'll be forced to do some fun and interesting things for everybody to see, and I think it'll be really fun. So there you go. That's our last little bit of LitRPG news. Moving on to some stories that are out now. Haven't had a chance to review them or read them, but they've come out recently, and here they are, including Dungeon Bringer 2, Battle Royale Online, a LitRPG adventure, The Founder's Start of Time, Aeon Chronicles Online book number 2. The first one came out about a year ago, so it's been a little while for that one. So book 2 is out. Also, Hero of Naught Remastered Everlife. This is by Jeffrey Falcon Logue, who's had a couple spots on the show already, mentioning him. But essentially, this is the first novel he ever wrote. He published on the Royal Road. Eventually he did the Slime Dungeon Chronicles, and that got published on Amazon. And later on, he eventually re-edited the original Railroad story and published it. It didn't do amazingly well, though. So this is essentially the relaunch of it. He took that original down off Amazon. He redid the story. He's added some content, messed with things basically, and he's put it back up on Amazon for you guys to enjoy. If you want to give it another chance, that's up to you, folks. I definitely hand you. I'm a fan of Jeffrey Falcon Logue and his works. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this one changes and differs from the original content. This is definitely a darker story, though, than the Slime Dungeon Chronicles. So just be aware of that. I believe he's kept that aspect of, according to other reviews for the book already. Okay, on to new LitRPG audiobooks. We just have one this week. That's it, folks. Sorry. It's Coast on Fire and Apocalypse LitRPG, The System Apocalypse, book number 5. It's out as an audiobook. That's it. I mean, not that's it, but it's a good story. But, we're always hoping for more. An upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read a bunch of stuff to you folks. Feel free to skip ahead if you want to, but there are some new additions to this list. Jin Tamer's Rivals is going to be out on April the 5th. It's going to be just tomorrow. We're recording on Thursday, so it'll be out on April the 5th for you guys to enjoy. Edge of the Abyss Respawn Trials book number 1 will be out on the 10th of April. The second book in the Firebrand series, which is a VGO Expanding Universe novel, will be out on April the 11th. It's entitled Embers of Rebellion. The cover art looks a little weird to me, like the head of that main character, like the body pose versus the head and the hands and the feet. A little weird, but that's the only thing I can say about it so far. April the 11th, Dukes and Ladders, the 5th book in that series is out. I'm probably updated their cover. I should probably check that out. On April the 10th, it'll be the second book in the Chapter Power series called Adapt. Remember, the first one is called Siphon. This one is published by Mountain Dew Press. On April the 22nd, it'll be Discardium, Class A Threat. On April the 25th, In Search of the Eldians, the Galacticon book number 2, written by Vasily Mahenko, author of the Way of the Shaman series. May the 7th, it'll be the Azure Dragon, a heroic fantasy saga, the Atar Chronicles book number 3. This is that literary story about the monk. So I like it. May the 14th, it'll be Monster LitRPG series, The Beetle. That'll be out. It's a new title. I have no idea what it's about. But it has pre-order. On May the 18th, it'll be Guardians of the Round Table book number 5, Crystal Mind. That is going to be out. On May the 20th, Web of Worlds, Reality Benders book number 4 will be out as well. June 1st, Realm of Nori book number 2. On June the 10th, the second book in the Discardium series is planned to be out on June. So it'll be April, May, June. So every 2 months, looks like they'll have some books out for that series. The 6th book in the Good Guys series will be out on June the 13th. It'll be called Home Siege Home. So always some fun titles there. On June the 15th, it'll be also Code Hero Champion is Playing book number 2. This is another Russian translation of a different series. The second book in there. You might recognize the pig as like one of the main characteristics of this cover art. On June the 20th, City of Freedom, Adam Online book number 2. We recently reviewed book number 1 in that series. On June 20th, it'll be the third book in the Jin Tamer series called Bronze League, book number 3, Evolution. So there we go. That's all the stuff I know it's coming in the near future, folks. And of course, if you're an author, or if you happen to find something else that's coming in the future that I don't know about, feel free to let us know about it at feedback@geekbastpodcast.com or at literaturepodcast@gmail.com. So there you go. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. Okay, next we have Viridian Gate Online, Dead Man's Tide, a LitRPG adventure, The Illusionist, book number 2, written by D.J. Bowden. It is 323 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Viridian Gate Online is more than just a game, and now it's Alan Campbell's whole world. Recently deceased and squishy as hell, Alan, a newly minted illusionist, is forced to flee for his life. He needs time to deal with his loss, both in-game and IRL. But first, he'll have to escape his crazy ex, the treacherous firebrand, Thalia Dasaran. On his way to safety and revenge, he'll team up with Titus, the Imperial Spymaster, as well as a crew of pirates, commandos, and even a shape-shifting mimic with a taste for blood. His path leads to Widertide, a gaslit city hidden in mist and governed by dark demigods. But even with Alan dead, the world marches on. Will the government seize control of VGO? Did Horace the blind beggar really die? And whatever happened to Jeff? Find answers, new purpose, and the machinations of the gods in this action-packed continuation of the Illusionist series. So there we go. Okay, for me, this is another good story set in the VGO universe. Again, remember it's an expanded novel series, which means it's set in the same universe and in the same timeline as the original Viridian Online series. However, this one is set a year before the first book in that series, so it actually has a lot of room to do a lot of interesting things, and I think that's one of its biggest strengths. Of the multiple expanded universe series that are out there right now, I think this one has the best storytelling potential. Again, because it's set before any of the main events of that series, it literally has a year, and that's not counting time compression of kind of doing whatever it wants without messing with that original series. And I think that's good and bad. And it's good in the respect that the author can kind of do whatever he wants to. He's even if he's messing with game mechanics, even if he's messing with like different attitudes of the gods or other characters, he still has so much room to just like explore the world, do whatever he wants to. On the bad side is that it doesn't always feel as connected to the VGO universe as maybe some readers would expect. Like a lot of the story feels very independent, with like the game mechanics tied to VGO and the gods directly like them being named and them being tied, and in the real world storyline, just kind of like some cameos in the second book tying it to that original VGO series. And for some readers that's going to be really good, for some readers that's going to leave them less interested. It kind of depends on obviously you as reader. For me, I liked it. I think that's one of the things that I like about this one as opposed to some of the other ones, is that I'm getting original storyline. I don't know what to expect because, again, it doesn't touch on the main Viridian Online storyline because it is set so far before it. So everything is new, everything is special, everything. There's still a sense of anticipation and suspense for me as a reader because, again, I don't know exactly where it's going to happen. The downside, of the course, of that is that on the real life storyline in the story, basically, it doesn't feel as important anymore. In book one, it was very important. It really was, and I that's what I liked about it. One of the things I thought that was really well done is that it made a really big connection to the real life storyline of the Viridian Online series. And this one, it feels a little ancillary. It feels like the real storyline is just kind of there to continue on that connection, but it doesn't really have any impact yet. And that may change for book number 3. And it might subsect it really well. But for now, the real life storyline just wasn't as spectacular as it was in books. I feel like most of the important events that were going to tie it to VGO from the real life storyline perspective happened in book 1. And so book 2 is going to be just a little lighter in that aspect. On the plus side, there's still good action adventure. The main character leaving the starting area, exploring the larger world. You get, again, new locations, new characters, new technology, new creatures to fight. One of the new characters, I should say, for me, my favorite is Nil, especially the character's background, the way they interact with the main character. I could actually see like a whole spin-off series or short story with just that character. I thought it was really, really fun and a really interesting character. While I liked this novel, of course, I actually liked it a little bit less than book 1 for 2 reasons, mostly. One, I'm just not a big fan of steampunk, flintlock, pirate battles, or sea battles. It's not really my thing. And those were aspects of the story. I mean, look at that cover art. That's expected. 2, again, the real life shoreline just felt a little sparse and unimportant. And again, that might change in book 3. For now, that just was something that's like, it's a little bit less enjoyment compared to book 1. Doesn't mean I didn't like it. I actually like the story still quite a bit. Overall, it's still good. It's entertaining. It has enough room to be its own thing, and still give you a connection to VGO, the main storyline universe. So for me, it gets a score 7.2 out of 10. So there we go. That's Viridian Online, Dead Man's Tide, A Little Bit of Adventure, The Illusionist, book number 2, with a score of 7.2 out of 10. And next up is going to be Daniel Shinhofen, author of the Darkhand Alpha World book number 7. It is 395 pages, $4.99. That is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. The path to peace brought them to the gates of the old city. Now Albert and his friends will need to find their way into the vaults under the city. They will need to bypass the undead and the cultists that roam the city to even find those tunnels, and that's only the start of the troubles they will face. Traitors to Stormguard are uncovered, and the king will have to be told. That can only happen after they deal with the 2 quests that have brought them this far. Vladimir Dragon hopes to put his brother Dmitri to rest, slaying the one known as the Dragon Eater, while Sir Cody Carter has come to make sure the Urn of the Souls is destroyed so it doesn't fall into Stein's hands. What will happen under peace will tilt the balance of what is to come, either in favor of the Crown of Stormguard or for Stein and his cultists. So there we go. Welcome back to Alpha World. And then there's the description of like, oh, this book contains adult themes. You think I could stop with the disclaimers, but even this far into the series, people are shocked by the content. This book contains a polyamorous relationship with one of the 4 people being a succubus. You have been warned. That is always such a funny thing to me because literally this is book 7 in the series. It's been a part of the entire thing. And yet people will write reviews saying, I can't believe this is here. So there you go. Okay, full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased a copy the day it became available. So here's the review. Basically, for me, this is another good entry in the Alpha World series. It's kept me reading till the wee hours of the morning. I really thought it was going to take me a couple days just because I had a full reading schedule this week. But gosh darn it, this thing is just so engaging. Every single one of these books from Daniel Shinhofen is just... It keeps me every single page. It's like, oh, I'll just read it for a couple more pages. And then it's like 3 in the morning. I'm like, okay, finally finished it. There you go, the end. And I can write my review. There's always good action, adventure, dungeon diving. This time there's some interesting political intrigue stuff that I wasn't expecting that I was really happy with. I was like, oh, that's a nice new way to introduce conflict. Good job. The book actually resolves. I was actually really surprised that the book is resolving so many big story plots in this series. I'm like actually there were like at least 2 big ones. I was like, oh, okay, finally got that finished up. I guess we're heading towards the end of the series now. And that's what it kind of feels like. It really just feels like, oh, the author is gradually trying to like tie up the big storylines so that the series can the authors always said there was always going to be series and 2 Alpha World. And then eventually it might lead into another series, maybe called Beta World. You don't know. So it's sad for me to see like those little hints of like, oh, this is ending. Oh no, one of my series I really like is going to end, but that doesn't mean that the main character or his group of adventurers is going to end their story. It's just, they might go somewhere else. They might do a different thing. But for now, I'm just enjoying the ride. This has a good storyline. For me, it scores 7.4 out of 10. That's an enjoyable story. Darkhand Alpha World book number 7 with a score of 7.4 out of 10. I had a good time with it. Okay, up next we have Dark World Transformation book number 2, written by Valerie Starsky. It is 557 pages, $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. The familiar world collapsed overnight. As the transformation progressed, disasters occurred throughout the earth, materials changed their properties, new species of flora and fauna appeared. The game converted our world into a huge dungeon, completely replacing the previous civilization. However, the alien plans for Earth began to go awry from the very beginning. The conversion was less successful than expected. An ordinary young man stole the bonus for the first gaming action, depriving the invaders of their perk. How can he manage the situation? Will the aliens become his allies? Which ones are his enemies? Dare they rebel against the all-powerful invaders, regain their land, and even create a new world? There we go. Part of that open description definitely talks about the plot line for book 1 a little bit, but that seriously shifts in book 2. I should acknowledge it up front, there are some translation issues with this. This is a translation from Russian into English. And so anytime you get that kind of stuff, you're going to get like some weird oddities of like just phrases don't translate correctly, just some like errors because you're translating thoughts from from Russian into English, and they're very different languages. So some of those phrases don't quite make a full transition. Still, it's nothing that ruined the story for me, but I know some of that stuff bothers readers, so I'm just making you aware of it. In this story, Yar and his group are sent to the Dark World, which is a place with different kind of RPG rules, and a different kind of conceptualization than the RPG apocalypse version on Earth. The story is still very slice of life, but again, because it's shifting to a new world, it's essentially abandoning the RPG apocalypse story in book 1 for now. It's from the novel description, it sounds like it's going to return to that maybe in book 3. But for now, the story definitely abandons that RPG apocalypse story. So that's the thing you really loved about book 1. It doesn't exist here. So be aware of that. Instead, the big story goal here is that the main character is dropped in this world. And he has to build up and defend this magical academy with new enemies showing up in waves to stop him and his group from surviving. There's also an expansion on the larger political factions in the universe and how they're impacting the group. The main character is, of course, becoming more powerful and becoming more influential. And believe it or not, the main character ups his overpoweredness in this novel. I know it sounds hard to believe considering how he ended in book 1, but he becomes even more powerful. Who would have thought? And that's part of either your joy or your annoyance with this particular novel on this series. It is a slice of life story. It's also very much an overpowered main character story. And a lot of the story here is just going to be fighting, the main character making up spells, saving different races. There's a little bit of crafting here. But most of it is just like this slice of life adventure when the main character is doing things. The game mechanics are a little more geared towards like essentially wave defense. So like you're creating a defensive structure in a magical academy kind of situation. And you're just having these waves of monsters and the main character and his new allies kind of dealing with them and expanding and growing. It's really fun in its own way. But again, you have to be okay with overpowered characters. You have to be okay with slice of life. And you kind of have to be okay with like this weird ish cultural translation of these of something from a different language. So if you're cool with all that, great, you're gonna enjoy this one. I like this one a little bit less than the book one just because I was really into the RPG apocalypse stuff in book one. I'm always a big fan of that particular subgenre of LitRPG, and this is not there anymore. So I'm looking forward to book 3 when it returns, hopefully, and we'll see how that goes. But for now, I still enjoy the story, but it gets a score of 7.1 out of 10. That's The Dark World Transformation, book number 1, with a score of 7.1 out of 10 from us. Okay, next up is Shyft, book number 1, Defender of Gallowind, a LitRPG adventure written by J. Donald and M. Cross. It is 356 pages, $4.99. It is available in Kindle Limited. And here is the author's description. When was the last time a game started with a real-life gunfight? In the industrial wasteland of future America, Solomon Herrick spends his days wandering the streets and getting into trouble. Staying one step with the local PD, his life is mostly spent immersed in history and aimless exploring, until Shyft Online comes along. Whether that's a good thing or not is still up in the air. Shyft 2.0, an immersive open-world RPG, just entered beta, and though Solomon Herrick isn't on the list, his friends knew a guy who could get them in. A chase and a gunfight later, and Saul is deposited in the world with nothing but a few rags on his back and a nearby stick to defend himself. With his friends gone, no knowledge of the game world, and zero guidance available, Solomon will have to rely on his ability to learn fast if he wants not only to figure out how to play the game, but figure out how to get out if he even can. And the rest of it is Shyft is a game that LitRPG series created by Mike Krause and Justin Bell, writing under M. Krause and J. Donald pen names. So these are authors with a long list of stories, and this is their attempt at LitRPG. And it doesn't work for me. That's a short review, it really is. This feels like a right-to-market novel where the authors just didn't get it right, unfortunately. Is this a LitRPG story? Yes. It has stats. It has level progression. It is an RPG world. But is it good LitRPG? Not particularly, it's not for me. First, while the novel has static character sheets and inserted, they actually did this a really weird way when they did their information sending. They use inserted pictures and graphics to show character sheets, novel or item descriptions, monster descriptions, monster character sheets. But then they repeated the information in plain text below it. And so essentially every time you get a novel description or an item description or a character description or character sheet, you're getting it twice every single time. And there's a lot of them. And so it becomes really repetitive really quickly. And there's several reviews on the Amazon side for that particular characteristics being kind of annoying to some readers. And also this is an unfortunate case that sometimes the information between the static graphic and the actual text below it doesn't match. And I'm like, oh, that's a source of numerical inconsistency for me. Like, oh, that's it always bugs me when like numbers don't match or they don't make sense or like the math isn't working out. Okay, now second issue I had, basically all the power the main character gets is it feels unearned. He literally gets dropped in this game after like this cyberpunkish like beginning setting that you just described in the novel description. And he immediately gets befriended by some magical creatures that give him free weapons, free armor, a slew of magical special techniques that scale with his level. And what I mean by that is that he's literally given an ability that gives him essentially free stat points when he activates it. And it's not like it's a minor amount. It's not like it's static either. He's essentially getting whole levels worth of free stats every time he uses it. So at level 3, it's essentially giving him 12 free stat points, which is a little over 2 levels worth of free stats. At level 5, he'll be getting 20 free stat points, which is 4 levels worth of free stats essentially. And it's one of those abilities that feels super broken. And it's one of those things that bothers me as a gamer, and that like nothing comes for free in a video game. Nothing comes for free. You always should be working for that. That's part of the reason that the RPG progression feels valid and useful, because you actually have to earn it. In this case, that and a lot of other free abilities and powers the main character gets just don't feel earned. So it's hard for me to empathize or root to the main character, because I feel like, oh, he's not really earning his power, and he's not really earning his successes in a way. And that's not just included to like those abilities. It's also just like levels. Like he literally goes from level 1 to level 3 within the first 10% of the novel just for kind of existing. And I could almost be okay with like the powers if there was like a scene showing that he earned them. Like he trains for months or weeks, and he's going through a bunch of trifles, and he's going through these quests and experiences, and that's how he gets these experiences and he gets these unique powers and abilities. But that's not what happens in the story. Instead, literally, it's like a paragraph that's kind of summarizes, oh, by the way, he did some training, and one day later, he now has all these things, without, again, feeling like he actually worked for it. So I'm like, oh, that was just something that just dragged my enjoyment down immensely. And it kind of ruins the rest of the story, because all those other future successes are based on that kind of stuff, and it continues to happen in the story. Third, even though the game mechanics are there, they don't always feel like they matter to the story. And again, this is a combination of the sometimes incorrect numbers between like the static and the text images of like spell descriptions and character stuff. But it's also just like the way that the numbers are reflected in the actual story. If you're going to use numbers in a Liberty story, they have to be accurate and they have to actually reflect it. So if you have a character who's only invested like 2 stat points into his character, but he's one-shotting a bunch of monsters who are like 2 or 3 times his level, it doesn't match up. It doesn't really reflect the actual investment that he has made in those character ability traits. And gamers are going to notice. They're going to notice that, oh, these things don't really match. It means that these game mechanics that you're using, the numbers don't really matter to the actual story, because you're just going to wand-wave your way through your fights. And that's what happens in the story, unfortunately. And it's just again one of those things like, oh, you can tell that the authors really made some effort in like including game mechanics and like going through all the stories and through their fight scenes and making sure there's character sheets and item descriptions. All that's really there a lot. But if it doesn't really reflect the reality of what's the gaming experience that the general audience has of like being a low character and fighting something 2 or 3 times your level, it's not going to feel genuine. And that's what happens in this story, unfortunately. Now, story-wise, it's kind of average. If I ignored the game mechanics portion of this thing and I was just looking at just the story aspect, it would probably still get a 6 out of 10 for me, just because the story itself is just not engaging. It's mostly like a cyberpunk beginning, getting the main character in the game, very skippable. And then once he's in the game world, even though he's supposed to be quite concerned with finding his friends who are also supposed to be stuck here somewhere, it's just a slice of life adventure where he's going on a bunch of there's quests there, but they're really just excuses to get him into more fights so that he kind of magically wins. And eventually, even though he does contact his friends again, he gets some of them. The rest of it's meant, I'm assuming, for the rest of the series. Even those fights are just like, oh, it's like, oh, these feel, I want to say cheap, but they do sort of feel that way because, again, the powers are unearned, or like they have special abilities and just items that are overpowered because they exist. Like there's no earning of them for these characters. So like their victories over like overwhelming odds don't feel as special, and they don't feel earned in a way. So that was super frustrating for me in the story. Overall, the technical writing is fine. There's no like spelling or grammar errors here. These guys are professionals. They have literally dozens of novels to their credits under like different pen names. They have good descriptions, good character descriptions, some even temp set world building that are decently fine. The action in the story is probably the best part of it, in that the fights feel very actiony. It's just that again, they're not reflective of the game mechanics. But the story just kind of seems again to exist to get you the next fight. And the actual RPG side of things was a big fumble for me. And that's kind of why I didn't actually like the story. Again, the story by itself, 6 out of 10, which is like, oh, it didn't work for me. But include in that the game mechanics that didn't feel like they mattered, numbers that just weren't accurate, and not really reflecting the RPG mechanics as an integral part of the storyline, in that they're actually reflected in the story. Sometimes, like, that was all just like, oh, no, this is, I can't deal with this. This is not enjoyable for me. I don't like this. And so it gets a score of 4 out of 10. That's Shyft, book number 1, Defenders of Gallowind, with the score of 4 out of 10. Okay, next up we have Save Point Reload, book number 2, Sci-Fi LitRPG series written by Matthew Sieg. This is 509 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Now that the LitRPG world in the Citadel has chewed Adam up and spat him out, he's right back at his original save point. Are things better? Maybe, maybe not. For one thing, he's still got brain cancer. For another, he's in trouble for breaking the rules last time. As punishment, he'll have to mentor the colony, an outnumbered race of misfit mushrooms, on the losing side of a battle for their home planet. Adam's new allies only stand a chance if he can unite the two sides of his broken faction. But first, they'll have to show him that some things are worth not resetting. So there we go. Actually, this is actually a really interesting series. This is, first of all, it's a good entry into the series. I like book 2 actually a little bit more than book 1. It is still light on RPG mechanics, but the mechanics that are there, they're woven in the storyline, they're consistent, they're an important part of this game world, or of this RPG universe game situation. And for me, though, however, the big draw is always going to be the sci-fi aspect. So I think there's some very interesting things done with this, kind of transferred to a game world thing. It's almost like in my mind, I always think of it as like, oh, it's the Running Man combined with like the Hunger Games or something. And I'm like, oh, with like RPG mechanics. And I'm like, oh, okay, okay, that works. That's a very interesting way of thinking of it. But I love the aspect that the aliens bring to the storyline. I'm a fan of stories that make you like pause in the middle, like you think, oh, that's an interesting way to think about that, or I hadn't thought about this. Or anytime that happens to me in a story, or I find myself pausing to think about something that's said or described, or like some speculative comment or story thread, to me that's always a plus. And this story does that a couple of different times, especially in the way that the author describes cultural relativity, using the alien plant things to show just how much of our human lives are really contextually based upon our unique physiology and our cultural evolution, and how it would or wouldn't translate to an alien civilization, or especially ones that are entirely different from us, because they grew up in different environments, had different evolutionary behaviors that adapted because of their conflicts or lacks of it, or their environments. It's just really fun, speculative stuff that I really enjoyed. One of the things I enjoyed the most about it. There's still good action, there's still good adventure here, there's still good RPG leveling and conflicts and stories and all that here. But for me, like, the one big gem is always like that, oh, this is the sci-fi aspect is really kind of fun and enjoyable. And I was really happy to see how well the author handled time travel, because that's always a tricky thing in a story. I'm happy that he avoided what I call the Groundhog Day effect, where it's just like the main character repeating again and again and again the exact same events. And that was avoided. I was like, oh, that's good. The author had a neat way of like sidestepping that issue entirely. Overall, good story, a little dark sometimes. I think that was noted by some other reviewers. I didn't think it was like too dark for me personally. But there are definitely, I guess, some dark moments. Still well written, still interesting. I'd agree with it. Gets a score of 7.5 out of 10 for me. That's Save Point Reloaded, book number 2, a sci-fi literature series with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Okay, our next review is going to be Into the Game Dungeon Crawl Quest, a LitRPG adventure wizard warrior quest, written by C.A.A. Allen. Okay, this one is 350 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Live real, play real, and just try not to die for real. Riff Jenkins is having a bad day. He's behind on his college tuition and is getting kicked out from his dorm. His girlfriend just broke up with him for playing computer games too much rather. And if that isn't bad enough, Riff hasn't been able to beat the Goblin boss in Dungeon Crawl Quest despite many months of trying. His brother Max says it's a glitch that DCQ is unbeatable, but Riff knows there's a way. When a mysterious package arrives from the recently deceased DCQ developer, Riff finally gets his reward for being one of the game's top players, a special grimoire, and an invitation to one of LA's premier gaming dens. But the grimoire is much more than it appears. When Riff syncs into a computer at the den, he's virtually transported to the game. And his bad day just got worse because the company that owns DCQ will be shutting down the servers at midnight if Riff and his band of misfit players can't beat the Goblin boss and save the game. Oh yeah, if the servers go down while they're in the game, they'll all die for real. Sorry, that was part of the story that kind of annoyed me. Honestly, the story actually starts out pretty decently. The werewolf section, which is essentially described in the novel description, is the first 1 to 12%. It establishes the main character's personality, the reason why he's sent to the game, some urgency of why he has to beat this boss, and I think it's actually handled really well. I think it's probably my favorite part of the story, which is saying something that I like the werewolf part better than the game part. By the 12% mark, the main character is in the game, and the story is it's absolutely LitRPG. There's RPG progression, RPG world, all that's there. There's no question about it here. Unfortunately, while the story is LitRPG, it has some serious story issues. And from the earliest parts of the in-game storyline, there are just these big plot holes that only got worse as the novel went on. I felt like sometimes when I was reading the story, some game rules or some world rules are just arbitrarily made, and then they were ignored or broken entirely to advance the story plot. Characters sometimes had foreknowledge that they shouldn't have, or just unexplained knowledge, it would say something or they would know things that was just explicitly there just to advance the story without ever explaining how they got that information or giving some kind of justification. And those little things that I know they bug me personally. Or just NPC characters who are supposed to be programmed in just spoke in ways that didn't make sense contextually. Either if it's either somebody obviously would have either programmed them in, or if it's a really transported to a game world situation, then why are they speaking that way if they have no cultural connection to our world? And it's just things like that. Even at one point, the main character even teleports people into the game world from the real world without ever having those people connected to a VR system or having them ever play the game. There's really no setup for this, no explanation why it's possible. It just sort of happens. And that happens as the story goes on more and more frequently, events like this. And it's just this is not turning out as well as I was hoping it was going to. And it just kept getting worse and worse as the story goes on. It all kind of culminates in this ending where the big issues, the big conflicts are magically resolved in ways that are just super one-way. It's literally this ending. And so it's I'm not going to say the actual ending. It's our group has solved the big conflict, and the bad guy's no, I have a twist. You haven't really solved that conflict. And the good guys are essentially oh no, look, we have now, and that ends. I was and it sounds silly, but that's what it feels like to me. That's what the ending of this novel feels like to me, and it was just super frustrating for a lot of. So it's at the beginning, starts out well. But it's not a good thing when I like your real life storyline in the beginning more than I enjoyed your game world stuff. Like I said, it was just, I really try to overlook a lot of the tiny things that didn't make sense. But the bigger plot holes and some of the forced story elements, I just couldn't. It was super frustrating for me as a read. And those elements ruined the parts of the story that I actually enjoyed. And I wish it wasn't the case, but it was. For me, I couldn't enjoy the story. I actively disliked it because of those elements of it. And it gets a score of 4 out of 10 for me. That's Into the Game, Dungeon Crawl Quest, a little bit adventure with a score of 4 out of 10. There we go. And next we have The Land of Trademark Online, written by N.P. Chekhov, or if you put the letters together, NPC. It's titled A Game Lit Parody of LitRPG. So it's actively a parody. It is 606 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Deuce's life took an unexpected shift when he found himself connected to a virtual fantasy world filled with authors as players. A genetic defect has some unexpected results in his transition, and he's now facing a world more vibrant and dangerous than anything he's come across in his previous life. He did not understand how far in over his head he was until he entered the Kingdom and realized that Gnox watched his every move. If you have problems with parody, satire, making fun of LitRPG authors, mutants, cannibals, harems, depravity, dirty jokes, clean jokes, puns, making fun of face drum, fun times, mouth-dropping moments, oh crap, he didn't, scenarios, or daddy issues, walk away. Again, let me emphasize parody and satire, and apologize ahead of time if I didn't make fun of you. You dodged a bullet this time. And yeah, there's some quotes there, but basically that's what it is. Warning, I should warn you in advance, there are some graphic sexual scenes in this story. I wasn't actually expecting that from it, and there's no like warning there, so just letting you guys know if you read this, that there's actual sex on there, the sex scenes and the graphic. Part of that is making fun of like harem aspects. So just FYI. Okay, this is mostly just a parody and satire of LitRPG. It makes fun of just about every well-known LitRPG author, insider Facebook drama, genre tropes, and a lot of other stuff. So while the story outside of that aspect is still LitRPG and there are RPG mechanics here, the big draw is going to be the parody and the satire. Like I said, literally half the fun of the story is seeing if your favorite author or your least favorite author is here, and if they're being made fun of and how they're being made fun of. That, like literally, that was like half the fun for me. I was like, oh, I know that guy, I know that person, and that lady. Oh, I remember that incident, and just like enjoying that aspect of it. So if you like, I don't say drama, if you like gossipy stuff, you're gonna love this, and you like LitRPG. If you just like, you're okay with like seeing your favorite authors, at least favorite authors being made fun of, or like just these situations, you're gonna do this as well. If you don't read this. Like this is not gonna be enjoyable for you if you don't like those aspects of it. Full disclosure, I take a hit in this story as well, and it's perfectly okay with me. I personally feel like parody and satire are some very important aspects of like criticism, and they reflect public perception of events, though exaggerated and lambasted. I legitimately know authors that are not going to enjoy this. I actually know authors who are really mad about some of the things and how they're portrayed in the story. But I'm like, personally, the story made me pause and think about some drama that has been directed towards the podcast. And that means that the story did its job. Like if it makes you stop and think about your place in a group or a culture, or it makes you think about how other people see or the events of a public reception of them, then that parody and satire has done its job. It's supposed to make you think. It's supposed to make you, especially if you're the one parodied, it's supposed to make you stop and think about, like do some self-analysis of it. And this one did that, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay with how I run the podcast. So I'm definitely okay with being lambasted for some things. Other parts of the story, I really just like sat back and laughed at the humor and the depictions of people who are, some of them are my friends. And I'm like, oh, that he'll like this part. He'll be super entertained by this description. Other people are like, ooh, he's probably not gonna like that. And it's not my story. So there you go. Overall, I think the story will most appeal to people who have some kind of knowledge of the Facebook drama and have their favorite or least favorite authors being depicted. Outside of that, though, if you're, I don't know that it's going to be as appealing to like general readers who aren't involved in the community, who don't have authors that they like want to see if they're picked out or not. But for me, I had a good time with it. I thought it was there's some very funny moments in here, and so it was entertaining. So for me, it gets a score of 7.3 out of 10. That's the land of Trademark Online with a score of 7.3 out of 10. And that's it for the show, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, for listening to me go on and on about the stories that I've loved this week and the ones that maybe I didn't. And I love the genre, and I love just taking the time to talk about it and read about it and write about it. Remember, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Patreon, on our website, of course, and a bunch of other great groups where authors and readers get together and chat and talk and go on about this genre that we love. And if you enjoyed the podcast and want to support us in any way, shape, or form to help keep us free and ad-free, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And again, folks, thank you very much for listening to me and for hanging out with me today. And until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.